Hello everyone, I hope you're all keeping well. In this video I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about the concept of the death of God and how this relates to the downfall as it's presently happening in Western Europe and across the West in general, to be honest. Why is this happening? Why has it happened? Well, this is not new. This is the result of a mass existential crisis that has been ongoing for over 150 years at least. And I guess you could say that it was first brought up by, although I would argue it's even older than that, but it was first brought up by the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche in 1882, when he expressed the idea that the Enlightenment had killed the possibility in a belief in God. And this was later termed the death of God, meaning that the Christian God that the Western European world believed in had ceased to exist due to the fact that the age of reason was beginning to reject the Christian mores, the Christian teachings, the Christian understanding, the worldview that was held. Now, contemporary historians believe that 19th century German idealist philosophers such as Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel are responsible for removing the specifically Christian resonance of the phrase and associating it with secular philosophical and sociological theories. Although the statement and its meaning are attributed to Nietzsche, Hegel had discussed the concept of the death of God in his Phenomenology of Spirit, in which he considers the death of God to not be seen as anything but an easily recognized part of the usual Christian cycle of redemption. So this was the context in which it was spoken about before. But later, Hegel wrote about the great pain of knowing that God is dead, the pure concept of that as the abyss of nothingness in which all being sinks. Hegel's student, interestingly enough, a man called Richard Roth in 1837, who was a very, very clever man, he wrote a theological text associating the idea of the death of God with the sociological theory of secularization. So we see this progression in understanding and thinking as all of this was going on back in the 1800s. Now, what did Nietzsche have to say about all of this? Nietzsche's idea, as it's stated in The Madman, is as follows. He states the following, he says, God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe the blood off us? What water is there for us to cleanse ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatest of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? Now, some people took that and thought it to mean that Nietzsche was saying that man should replace God. But actually what he was doing, this is very, very interesting. What Nietzsche did, not only in The Madman, but also in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, was to ask fundamental questions of human beings, whether in fact you are worthy of replacing God himself as a concept. Now, as I talked about before, it's not a daft idea to believe in God, okay, if you do. And if you don't, that's okay too, I suppose, but here's the thing. The notion of God, especially in a deistic context, refers to natural processes that are too infinite and too complex, happening around us at all times. The grain of sand that gets blown onto another beach or whatever. All these various things that are occurring constantly, which at a glance to human eyes appear chaotic, but have some sort of natural process or order to it all. Well, that was how the deists especially looked at the idea of God. Okay, and even in its inception and conception, I strongly suspect that that's what motivated people to believe in a monotheistic deity. And also, by the way, pantheistic deities as well. Right? So, however people looked at things, they were described in a multiplicity of ways metaphysically, but a lot of people understood things in a similar fashion across cultures. Okay? And it just so happened that the West, for some reason, really chimed with the idea of monotheism. Some would argue that it was thrust upon them. That's possible, but I think what happened was that it just made sense to the Western mind to describe all these various things that were happening in the natural world, the physical laws and so on, under this umbrella term. Okay? But due to the supernatural emphasis that was put on everything by the Roman Catholic Church, I would say, eventually the Age of Reason and Enlightenment was able to knock down that straw man. Now, what that did, however, and this is what Nietzsche recognized, and I'll go on to talk about that in a minute, what that did was to rip away the soul of Christianity, which was not to do with the church itself or the institutions or whatever, but it was actually to do with the understanding, the metaphysical understanding of one's being, the ability to try at least and answer the existential questions which occur to us all at some point in our lives. But instead what happened was, you see, what Christianity had done is, it had incorporated into itself, because of various, I dare say, revolutions inside the church, it had incorporated into itself ideas of philosophy, ideas of metaphysics, many lofty ideals. Understandings of natural law even were incorporated into Christianity at certain points. The emphasis was put on it at certain points and then ripped away from it again and so on. But the point is, it was still there. Now, what was then done, because this Age of Reason had posed this question to the straw man of theology, the straw man of belief even, let's say, is that it ripped away anything that was of value, that was of substance inside Christianity as well. Okay? People were starting to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because the Roman Catholic Church had become politicized. It was using religion as a political tool. It was using, well, I guess religion in a sense was created for that, but it was using belief as a political tool, and those people that had Christian beliefs, it was using them as pawns. Okay? And monarchies did the same thing as well, of course, through the ages. So, but this happens. The point being, though, that once Christianity was ripped away from the West, or it was on the point of happening, you then saw, well, what did you see? You saw the rise of nihilism, and this is what Nietzsche goes on to talk about further in his works. So, just to reiterate, Nietzsche used the phrase to sum up the effect and consequence that the Age of Enlightenment had had on the centrality of the concept of God within Western European civilization, which had been essentially Christian in character since the later Roman Empire. Now, Nietzsche recognized that the crisis that this death of God represented for existing moral assumptions in Europe, as they existed within the context of traditional Christian belief, was going to be very serious. He went on to say, when one gives up the Christian faith, one pulls the right to Christianity or Christian morality out from under one's feet. This morality is by no means self-evident. By breaking one main concept out of Christianity, the faith in God, that is, one breaks the whole. And that's a very interesting statement, because he's talking there exactly about what I was saying. So, Christian morality, as I said before, it got tied into ancient philosophies of morality, which were to do with natural law and so forth. And as a result of that, people started rejecting the concept of morality overall. The problem, as he correctly identified, is to retain any system of values in the absence of a divine order. Now, Western civilization as a whole could no longer believe in a divinely ordained moral order because of the existential questions that were being supposedly answered by materialism. Nietzsche rightly explained that the rejection of a belief of cosmic or physical order would also lead to a rejection of absolute values themselves, to the rejection of belief in an objective and universal moral law or natural law that is binding on all individuals. Thus, the loss of an absolute basis for morality would eventually lead to nihilism. What's interesting is that Martin Heidegger also came to understand this for himself. And Heidegger was a great philosopher in his own right, although he'd made some mistakes and judgments in error, of course. Heidegger saw it not only as the death of God, this process that was happening, this secularization, not only as the death of God, but of metaphysics. And in his view, Nietzsche's words can only be understood as referring not to a particular theological or anthropological view, but rather to the end of philosophy itself. In Heidegger's words, philosophy had reached its maximum potential as metaphysics, and Nietzsche's words warn of its demise. So like I said, there was a outright rejection of philosophy across the Western world due to this death of God, let's say. This collapse of the transcendence of being and the consequent rise of materialism led to what we now see in this modern age. And this is not a pretty sight. It's not pleasant to see. Consumers who are consumed by their own consumption. They're trying to fill a void that is never-ending. We are also mistaking technology for scientific advancement. I always say to people, just because you've got a smartphone in your pocket doesn't mean that you're scientifically literate. We've traded in our holistic and rounded understanding of reality for a very small-minded and, I would dare say, skewed view of everything that is. We've adopted these insane ideas of superior and inferior beings, and we are starting to see ourselves as individuals as superior. And what's even more alarming is that there are people who are becoming, I don't even know what to call it really. I mean, I've spoken about it before, but I don't think that it is just the case that people are becoming collectivized, okay? But that's something I'll talk about later, at a later point, at some point. But people are becoming collectivized, right? And when people become collectivized and believe themselves as a collective to be superior, that is even more terrifying, And they're starting to view everyone else as inferior. This is what's happening to our minds as a result of the rejection of any kind of fundamental universal moral law. And it's bizarre because we delusionally believe ourselves to be satisfactory replacements for the concept of God. And almost every human being alive in Western Europe today and throughout the West, that includes North America, and pretty much everywhere else where you see, the Western culture having emerged, everyone believes themselves to be the Übermensch that Nietzsche talked about. This is very, very disturbing. Because Nietzsche was talking about it in a way to expose the idea of it being flawed in actuality, but people, for some reason, wrongly took it as a serious statement. He or she today, the individual today, believes that they possess the will to power, when they don't even have the willpower to resist the machinations of governments and corporations. It's a very, very dangerous blend of various things that's happening right now. And actually, if I'm honest about it, it's exactly what Nietzsche was lamenting. You see, he wasn't celebrating the death of God. And I don't think enough people understand this. He didn't celebrate it. He was sad about that. The fact that it was happening. He recognized that it was an inevitability, but he also recognized the deep, serious upheavals that would occur. And we, as a civilization in the West and in various societies in the West, have devolved into valuing bits of metal and stones as being valuable. You know, we've got these magpie minds that value gold and diamonds as more valuable than the lives of other human beings. This is starting to happen now, right? And it's been happening for a while, since materialism took hold. So we've got excess materialism fused with capitalism to create corporatism and actual fascism. People talk about fascism all the time, but they don't understand what the hell it is. Well, you know, take a look around you. The world we're living in right now, everywhere pretty much, you are seeing fascism thriving. That marriage between corporations and states. And corporations doing the bidding of and bending to the will of governments, and governments doing the same thing when it comes to certain conglomerates. And what's driving it all? Believe it or not, it's actually to do with our nihilistic angst, because we have no commonly agreed upon, or we refuse to accept any sort of universal divine system of values, moral laws. You know, we've rejected everything. We have rejected natural law. We have rejected the philosophical underpinnings of natural law. We have rejected anything that could hold us to account for our own actions. Any understanding of action and consequence, it's all gone. And that is the byproduct of the age of reason. You know, we think ourselves as so clever these days, but we're really not. There are people, for example, I was having a conversation with somebody some months ago, and it actually infuriated me. And this is part of the reason why I have stopped interacting with people in general. Okay? It's people who believe in determinism. Okay? They piss me right off. I'll make no bones about that, because it's an insane idea. The number of things that have to come together in order for a certain event to happen, they have no understanding of that. Okay, none at all. The various forces which act upon the smallest microbes, the smallest organisms, the smallest dead matter, they have no conception of that, right? And yet they talk about things as if it is definitively true that, oh, you know, everything is determined, predetermined already. Whether it's in the arena of genetics, whether it's in the arena of whatever else. You know, I can't understand why you would believe in the lunacy of that, and I don't understand people who do that. Okay, because it's nonsense. Truthfully, it's nonsense. It's pseudoscience, but people believe in it. And more people are believing in this kind of garbage. Because it's been proliferated so much throughout this decaying society. And actually, one of the reasons why I think they like to believe in it is because it excuses their bad behaviors. Okay? There are people out there who would much rather create problems, create trouble, rather than try to find solutions to problems. You know, that is really abhorrent and terrifying that people are doing that. And it's happening to people that would otherwise maybe be good people. You know, but they're giving into insane modes of thinking because the societies that we're living in right now are insane. Okay, they've gone off the chain. You know, they've chewed through the leash. And it's not a pleasant sight. What we are living through right now is not pleasant. Okay? You've got an abundance now of people who think tyranny is an okay state of affairs, provided that the right government does it, provided that the right people who agree with their worldview are doing it. I don't know what to say to that. It's just reaching epic proportions of stupidity. Human reactions and behaviors are just... I don't know what to say. But this is the thing. I mean, getting back on point, this is the reason why it's happening, because there's been a rejection of metaphysical realities, there's been a rejection of truth, there's been a rejection of philosophy, there's been a rejection of everything, and instead, people are buying into bullshit. And that bullshit is called materialism. And it is one of the most dangerous and insidious sort of ideas. I would call it an ideology at this point, actually, because you believe in it. Anyway, I'll leave it there, but it's just some food for thought that I figured would be a good idea to talk about. Anyway, as I say, that is something that was on my mind for a while, and I just thought I'd share it with you. But take good care of yourselves. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have an excellent day. Take care.